Everyone wants to be special. Most people just won't say so. And I get it. There's something uncomfortable about saying or admitting it out loud. It feels like ego, like you're claiming your existence is more relevant than anyone else's and feel as though you haven't earned the right to say that yet. So you call it ambition or fold it into whatever respectable thing you're working toward and move on with your life without ever addressing it. Anzu Hanashiro from the tunnel to summer the exit of goodbyes didn't do any of that. She, unlike us, was brave enough to embrace her desire to be special and curate her whole world in service to that desire. Now, I already made a video on this story and I glossed over her way too fast, intentionally because I already had this video in mind. She got maybe a third of the time she deserved and I've wanted to come back to her ever since. Anzu is one of the most misread and underappreciated characters in recent anime, and what she actually represents is a whole lot bigger than a girl who wants to be famous. One of the things I like about Anzu is that she never really hides what she wants. In the story, she isn't afraid to state her desire and worldview, which can come off as snobby in a way. But if you think about what she actually said, logically it's sound. Quotes in here. I mean, it's true though, there's no value in being ordinary. The law of scarcity applies to way more than just economics. Rare, life-changing experiences are worth exponentially more than your average day-to-day, and much rather live a short, fulfilling life than a long and boring one. It's important to put your feelings aside and evaluate what she's saying from a neutral perspective. If you do that, you'll understand that she is inventing, wishing, or expressing some romantic notion of what life could be. The law of scarcity, she takes an economic principle, rare things hold more value than common ones, and applies it to human experience itself, draws a conclusion from it, and lands on ordinary lives matter less. Yes, it's a pretty cool thing to say, but it's difficult to deny because she's reasonably right. Rare things do hold more value, and that's not wishful thinking, it's just how value works. And what I find even more interesting than what the quote says is what it doesn't do. Anzu isn't here claiming she's already special. She's not saying she's better than anyone or placing herself on some pedestal. She's just stating a fact, naming her philosophy. The specificity of it is what separates her from every character in fiction who vaguely wants more without ever thinking about why. Anzu actually thought through about what she wanted and why she wanted it. That's what sets her apart. Now, here's where it changes completely, and this is the part I think most people miss entirely, so stay with me here, everything else depends on it. Anzu's drive to be special isn't born from anything vain or her just looking in the mirror one morning and deciding she was too good for an ordinary life. She wants that kind of life because she already knows from personal experience what ordinary ends in. Her grandfather passed away, the family cried, gathered and grieved for him, and then a few weeks later she had forgotten him. This tends to be something that's usually brushed past easily, but it's really important for Anzu specifically because it defines the why behind her desire. The lesson she learns from that experience isn't the world forgets people after they die, which would be sad but abstract, pretty easy to hold at arm's length. What she learns is something far more personal than that. She was one of the people who forgot him. Someone she cried for at his funeral, someone she loved, and within weeks he was gone from her daily life as if he'd barely even been a part of it. If she can so easily forget about someone who was so dear to her, what is anyone in this world going to do to her after she's gone? Anzu isn't being paranoid here. It's only natural to conclude that after evaluating herself and being honest about what she saw. And once you see that as being the root of all of it, her entire worldview doesn't look like a little quirk anymore, but rather like the only rational response available to someone who looked at the moment honestly and took it seriously. The point here is Anzu didn't decide to be remembered because she thought she was above being ordinary. In all honesty, she was just scared. Scared of what it meant to be ordinary after seeing up close and personal what it resulted to when one settled for it. Interesting part is, unlike being great, you don't have to particularly do something to be forgotten. It's just the default, and she would much rather die having left something real behind than live long and quietly and disappear the same way her grandfather did. Like I already insinuated before, her desire shapes her world and every single decision she makes, including the social ones. And this is something I want you to really pay attention to because it's where her desire mutates from being a career ambition to a way of life for her. Anzu has no friends at school. The story presents this just as a fact, not like some tragedy. She showed up in a new town and started a new school and didn't make any friends. If you've watched the movie, you would know it was deliberate on her part. Her aura genuinely just wasn't inviting for anyone, and she didn't actively pursue any friendships either. And what the story manages to get out of not dramatizing this is the actual truth of the situation. Anzu isn't sitting alone wishing someone would talk to her. She's simply not interested in most people by her own deliberate choice. She already has a set standard that the people around her have to meet her definition of unordinary. They have to be worth her time because she's not going to take a common commodity. People who, if they die tomorrow, you'll still be talking about them past the third week. Everyone else gets left out of the picture. It's just her personal principle. Anzu isn't hoping for a social life to form around her. Her worldview wouldn't allow that to just happen. She has to actively select the themes of the kind of social life she would deem valuable. This is where Tono comes in. What actually gets him through that thick filter of Anzu's isn't talent, impressiveness, or some immediate legible kind of specialness. He just makes an offhand comment, something about parents, which Anzu found unusual, something that didn't fit the pattern of what you would expect from people his age, and it was enough for her. It was enough to prove that Tono is unordinary, that Tono was worth her time. So the whole relationship between them that everyone loves started from her classifying him basically as not like the rest, which is of course not the most romantic origin story you ever hear. It's pretty transactional when you look at it clearly, but at the very least it's honest. It also kind of tells you what her desire costs her on a daily basis. Her so-called loneliness isn't framed in a way that would make you feel sorry for her, because it's a choice that she made for herself and decided to hold on to without compromising, even if it meant being alone in a school full of people. Most of us would eventually crack and just seek whatever warmth was immediately available, because isolation gets uncomfortable real fast. Anzu, and I cannot stress this enough, did something extremely difficult here, sticking to a principle she set for herself, regardless of how hard it became for her to stick to it. That level of commitment to a custom-made value system is her desire put on display to the world on a daily basis, in who she talks to, who she walks past, in every small social decision she makes without even thinking about it anymore. It's become a part of her. The tunnel. Here's what she actually goes in there for and what the story ends up saying about her through it, because this is where the story gives its most relevant take about her desire, and if you miss it, you genuinely miss the one thing that ties all this together. Anzu wants the talent to become a great mangaka, specifically the kind whose name gets spoken decades after they're gone. I'm talking Naoki Urasawa, Takehiko Inoue, Kentaro Muria, that kind of level. And in the context of everything we've established about her, the tunnel is a shortcut, a way to skip past the uncertainty of whether she actually has what it takes and go directly to the outcome she needs. I'm gonna get into spoilers here, so fair warning. The first time she and Tono go into the tunnel together, there are pieces of paper inside already. Those papers are her drawings, which her parents threw away months earlier after they found out she was putting more of her time into manga than her actual schoolwork. Manga pages she spent months working on were destroyed just because her parents wanted her to take a conventional path to success, and somehow those drawings ended up in the tunnel. And this is one of the most interesting parts of her whole arc. The tunnel never gave her what she wished for in the first place. She went in there looking for talent she thought she didn't have, but eventually what the story makes clear is that she already had that talent. It was never missing in the first place and was always in her the entire time. Her parents tried to take it from her, but the tunnel gave it back. The tunnel sort of showed her that she already had that talent, giving her those pages back. In the context of this story, it's the tunnel giving her back something she lost, using the manga pages as a sort of metaphor for the fact that this is the talent you have. Your parents try to throw it away but take it back. You already had it in the first place, you just need to be more confident in yourself, which is the one thing Anzu lacked. She wanted proof that she was special enough to deserve the future she was chasing, and the answer had been in her hands before she ever walked into the tunnel. Bittersweet is a word, I guess, but again, the point I'm trying to make is the particular shape of the irony. She constructed her entire existence around the desire to be something extraordinary. She spent so much time and effort investigating a supernatural tunnel, trying to find what she thought was missing from her. What the story gave her instead was confirmation that nothing was ever missing. Anzu Hanashiro was always a mangaka. Alright, now it's time for me to talk about what I've actually been building throughout this video. Everything up until now has been about Anzu, but what I'm trying to say is much bigger than her. The desire to be special, to be remembered, to matter, to leave something behind that outlasts you isn't something some people have and others don't. It's something fundamental we all have, just resting underneath everything we do, regardless of whether we're conscious of it or not. Of course, the most common opposition to this is people saying, I don't want to be special, I just want a small, quiet life. Alright, fair enough, you have the right to say or want whatever it is you want, but let's take a look at that, shall we? In a world where most people are performing some version of themselves for an audience somewhere, online, at work, in their relationships, choosing a small, quiet life is a deliberate act of refusal, a decision to be the kind of person who doesn't need any of that, who lives without chasing visibility or recognition. And what is a deliberate decision to stand apart from what everyone else is doing, if not, in some way, an attempt to stand apart? Even opting out is, in a way, opting in. And that's before we get to what people actually spend their energy on, their career they choose, their crafts they keep circling around, the things they build and share and show to people. Look close at any of it and somewhere underneath there's almost always something that sounds like, I want to matter, I want to be seen clearly by the people around me, I want what I do to mean something past just existing and living. That's the desire underneath everything else. Most people never actually confront it directly and just let it exist unnamed in the background. Anzu did what a lot of us can't do because we either didn't notice or are too afraid to do. She gave it a name, she called it what it was, and built her life around it without apologizing for wanting something she wants. And I think the reason she makes some people uncomfortable is exactly that. She's saying out loud what a lot of us have been keeping quiet for a long time. Hearing it from a character gives a shape to something most of us have been pretending isn't there. She's a mirror, my friends, and mirrors are extremely uncomfortable when they catch you by surprise. Let me deal with another obvious counter before this video ends, because I know it's sitting there and it sounds reasonable. God, I always call all the counters reasonable. She just wants to be a successful mangaka. It's just ambition, a career goal. Plenty of characters have career goals and we don't spend 15 minutes philosophizing about them. Fair, I understand. Wanting to be a great artist, wanting your work to outlast you, that's a standard then of creative ambition. Nothing immediately unusual there. Here's my answer to that. Your average ambitious character wants to succeed. Winning is the point, the achievement, the recognition, the result. What they want is to get there. Anzu wants to not be forgotten after she's dead. There's a massive difference between those two stances. One is a professional aspiration with a finish line you can see. The other is an existential position on what human life is worth. And those two things are not even close to the same conversation. The proof is exactly how she phrases it. She'd rather live a short, fulfilling life than a long, boring one. A person with a regular career ambition doesn't frame it that way. They want the work, they want the win, the length of the life around it isn't the point. For Anzu, that length is what actually matters. It's a philosophical stance on existence with a specific emotional root in a grandfather she forgot within weeks of his funeral. And dismissing it as ambition is probably the most accurate example of not taking her seriously enough, because doing that means losing all of it. The grandfather, the argument for scarcity, the selective isolation, the drawings in the tunnel, every piece of what makes her a complete person rather than a shorthand. She wants to be a famous mangaka doesn't explain any of those things, and I would find it personally disrespectful if you simplify her that much. And come on, she literally said she would rather live short and full than long and empty. You cannot read career planning into that sentence. You just can't. Don't even try. Rare life-changing experiences are worth exponentially more than ordinary ones. Anzu Hanashiro said that. Not only did she say it, she curated her whole life around it. She left out people she never bothered to befriend. She walked into a supernatural tunnel. She sent her love off without chasing him. All of it because she decided, at some point, that ordinary wasn't enough of a life to live. Most of us agree with that worldview and have for a very long time. We just can't admit it for a multitude of reasons. The desire behind her whole arc, to be remembered, to matter, to not dissolve the way her grandfather did, is the same desire that wants in degrees of silence underneath most of what we do. The careers we build, the crafts we love, the need to be seen by the people around us. It's there. It's always been there. It is, in some form, just what it means to be a person who's thought about mortality long enough to understand what it actually means. And very few of us are brave enough to do what she did with it. To face it, to name it, to commit to it completely, to look at a world that forgets people within weeks of their funeral and decide, intentionally, to make herself as difficult to forget as possible. Most of us just hope it happens to us somehow. It's okay to want what Anzu wanted. Understand it's not ego or arrogance or something to be ashamed of or keep buried under more socially acceptable language. If it's something you want to, go ahead and chase it like she did, because that's the only way you're going to get it. Anzu felt what most people felt, that on its own is nothing special. She was just one of the very few people brave enough to openly say it.